Tonight it's just you, the dim light, and the ceiling above you splitting into tiny constellations of cracks. Your eyes trace them like nervous star maps, following the same lines you've memorized 100 times before. You tell yourself you're only trying to fall asleep, but you know that's not what you're really doing. You're waiting, suspended, held in a strange pause between one life and the next. What you don't realize is that this pause has a name in quantum physics. It's related to what scientists call the Quantum Zeno effect, the way constant observation can freeze a system in place. And that is exactly what you've been doing with your own existence. Watching it, tracking it, checking it like a pulse that never quite changes. Every night your awareness climbs those same ceiling cracks, and every night your reality obeys the observation. Nothing moves, nothing shifts, nothing truly changes. But tonight is different, and you can feel it at the edges of your awareness. Something else is in the room with you, not a presence you can see, but a frequency you can feel. Your thoughts don't quite land the way they usually do. Time feels slightly delayed, as if the seconds are waiting for your permission before they fall. The familiar heaviness in your chest doesn't feel like pure exhaustion anymore. It feels like pressure building before a phase transition. This message didn't randomly appear in your feed. It synchronized with you. While you were staring at that ceiling, your quantum field was quietly broadcasting a distress signal, a silent request for interruption, for interference, for anything strong enough to break the observer loop you've been trapped in. And somewhere in that vast ocean of probabilities, this exact transmission lit up and locked onto your frequency through pure synchronicity. You think you clicked this video, but the deeper truth is, the video clicked you. Because you've been living in slow motion lately, haven't you? Days that stretch out and blur together, nights that feel like empty hallways you pace up and down in your mind. You replay conversations, you rewatch decisions. You observe yourself thinking about changing, without actually crossing the threshold into change. That's the Quantum Zeno trap. The more closely you watch your life, the more your life stays exactly the same. Yet underneath the stillness, there's a tremor, a subtle vibration in your energy that won't be silenced. It's the awakening impulse, the part of your consciousness that refuses to accept this as your final story. The part that knows your DNA wasn't coded just to survive routines and repeat cycles. It was coded for restructuring, for entanglement with higher timelines, for coherence with realities you haven't tasted yet. So, as your eyes rest on those cracks above you, feel this. The signal has arrived, the loop has been seen. And once the observer sees the prison clearly, the prison cannot stay intact for long. You keep staring at those cracks because, on some level, you know they're not just flaws in plaster. They're diagrams of your days. The same lines, the same junctions. Like a route, your mind walks every night without ever finding an exit. And if you're honest, it isn't just the ceiling. Your whole reality has started to feel like that texture of repetition. You wake up and it's as if the script of your day loads before you even move. The same notifications, the same faces, the same conversations that circle back to those familiar, unresolved themes. You scroll not because you're curious, but because you hope something outside you will finally interrupt the loop. Instead, your feed reflects it back. Similar stories, recycled dramas, spiritual posts that sound good, but don't touch the ache you actually feel. Then there's the déjà vu that won't leave you alone. Not the cute kind people joke about, but the kind that makes your stomach drop for a second. You're mid-sentence, and suddenly you know you've had this exact exchange before. Same words, same tone, same emotional outcome. You walk into a room and feel, with quiet dread, I've stood here in this exact feeling too many times. It's like reality is glitching, replaying scenes because your consciousness hasn't selected a new track yet. This is what happens when an observer loop hardens. Your awareness keeps collapsing the same probability waves in the quantum field, like a needle stuck in one groove of a record. Every reaction, every expectation, every micro-choice sends the same instruction. Repeat this. This is what we know. And the field, infinitely obedient, keeps delivering more of the same. Not because you're cursed, but because coherence has formed around your old patterns. You feel it most in the way time behaves around you. Some days drag like wet cloth, every hour heavy and slow, as if the clock itself resists forward motion. Then whole weeks vanish in a blur, leaving you with that hollow sensation of, how is it already this late in the year? That distortion isn't random. It's what happens when your consciousness sits between timelines, never fully committing to the next one, never fully releasing the last. You're entangled with multiple versions of yourself, and the tug-of-war stretches time thin. Even your body knows something is wrong. Your nervous system lives on standby, not fully at rest, not fully activated. You feel tired but wired, exhausted yet unable to shut down. Sleep becomes fragmented, filled with strange, symbolic dreams that feel more real than your daytime exchanges. You wake up with the residue of other worlds in your chest, but no language to explain them. So you shake it off, make coffee, slide back into the loop, and call it another day. Synchronicities still show up, but lately they confuse you more than they comfort you. Repeating numbers on clocks, a song that echoes your exact thought, a random phrase that mirrors the sentence in your head. Instead of feeling guided, you feel teased, as if the universe is hinting at something you can't quite decode. That's what flickering coherence feels like. Sometimes you line up with your higher timeline, sometimes you fall back into the old morphic resonance of who you used to be. You've started to grow suspicious of hope, and that's one of the clearest symptoms. Part of you believes in awakening, in quantum shifts, in miracles. Another part has watched things almost change so many times that it quietly stopped trusting. You say the right affirmations, but your cells remember every moment where things felt different for a few days and then snapped back to normal. That memory lives as static in your field, scrambling every new signal you try to send. So you do the only thing that seems safe. You wait, you count ceiling cracks, you refresh timelines, you hold your breath between messages, you replay the same stories and call it processing. But under that waiting, something more intelligent is happening. Your entire system is hovering at the edge of a phase transition, like water heated right to the brink of boiling. You're not lazy. You're not broken. You're a highly sensitive consciousness caught in its own observer loop, sensing that a rupture is coming but not yet knowing how to surrender to it. And that's what we're naming tonight. Not your failure, not your weakness, but the precision of the pattern that's been running you. Once you see how deeply it threads through your habits, your relationships, your experience of time itself, you can finally understand why it's been so hard to shift, and why the next movement won't come from forcing your life to change, but from altering the very way your awareness touches reality. You've been living like a security camera in your own life, chosen one, always watching, rarely intervening, documenting the same hallway of experiences from the same angle. That's the unconscious Quantum Zeno effect. You keep checking the state of your life with the same expectations, so the universe keeps freezing you in the same scene. But tonight, as you lie there counting ceiling cracks, that pattern is being challenged. Here's the shift no one explained to you. You are not just the observer in the loop. You are also the field in which the loop is happening. The self that feels stuck is only one point of awareness inside a much larger consciousness, already moving beyond this ceiling-bound story. At the most fundamental level, your reality isn't made of solid objects. It's made of probabilities in the quantum field around you. Each time you bring your attention to a fear, a memory, a desire, a worst-case scenario, you act like a measurement device. Your focus collapses one probability wave into one lived experience because your attention carries coherence, a stabilizing signal that tells the field, this pattern, again, keep it running. That's why your days feel familiar in a way that almost hurts. Your consciousness has been unconsciously stabilizing an outdated version of you. The boredom and heaviness you feel about your repetition aren't just emotions, they're diagnostics. They show that your inner system is rejecting the old coherence pattern. Your cells are tired of carrying frequencies too small for who you're becoming. On a subtle level, your DNA is already restructuring through tiny shifts in how you react, what conversations drain you, what you can no longer pretend to enjoy. That tension inside you is not failure, it's awakening. In physics, when a phase transition happens, a system doesn't politely improve. It jumps. Water doesn't slowly negotiate its way into steam. It holds steady, then crosses a threshold and becomes something else. You are standing at that threshold. Every déjà vu, every distorted stretch of time, every night you lie there knowing you can't stay where you are, has been heating your consciousness toward its jump point. The quantum field isn't punishing you, it's simply obeying your last clear signal. Until now, you've been sending commands in the form of unconscious questions. Why am I still here? Why does this always happen to me? When will this finally change? The field echoes those questions back as matching experiences. That's the observer loop feeding itself. But the moment you begin asking different questions, what timeline am I ready to entangle with now? What version of me is my body already remembering? What reality would match the signal of my deepest truth? Your coherence pattern starts to rewrite. Synchronicities then stop feeling like cosmic teasing and start feeling like coordinates. A line in a book answers the exact ache in your chest. Someone appears right when the old loop would usually pull you backward. These are not accidents. They're proof that your observer function is shifting from passive surveillance to conscious participation, from isolation to morphic resonance with a higher version of your life. And here is the hidden gift of the Quantum Zeno effect. The same principle that kept you frozen can become the engine of your freedom. When you repeatedly bring gentle, steady attention to a new state, a softer nervous system, a more spacious identity, a timeline where you no longer need the same suffering to feel real, your observation begins stabilizing that reality instead. Breath by breath, you start to entangle with a future self who already lives beyond ceiling crack limbo. Not by forcing affirmations, but by letting your awareness rest in the feeling of that self, as if it were already here. You're not here just to collect concepts. You're here to upgrade how your consciousness touches existence itself. And as that upgrade begins, the ceiling above you is no longer a symbol of limits, but a blank, quiet surface where a different you is about to start drawing entirely new constellations of possibility. At some point, you have to consider the possibility that you are not just in this pattern, you were born to interrupt it. Because think about it, chosen one, if you were meant to be another comfortably asleep consciousness, you would have settled into this loop long ago. Ordinary people don't lie awake, counting ceiling cracks while their soul quietly studies the structure of reality. They don't notice the way time bends around emotional triggers or how one decision ricochets through weeks of synchronicities. You do. You always have. That sensitivity is not a flaw, it's a function. You are built like a measurement device, with a soul, a living instrument tuned to detect distortions in the quantum field. You feel when something is off, long before it becomes visible. You sense when a relationship is misaligned before there's any proof. You know when a job, a city, a version of yourself has expired because your whole body starts buzzing with low-grade resistance. That is what an advanced observer consciousness feels like from the inside. Most people mistake their numbness for peace. You never could. Even in the seasons when you tried to be normal, when you forced yourself to accept routines, to silence your questions, to shrink your awareness down to what everyone else calls reality, there was always a part of you that refused. A quiet, defiant signal under your skin whispering, "This cannot be all there is." That signal is your original coherence, the blueprint of who you were before the observer loop wrapped around you. Your role here is not accidental. The quantum field doesn't scatter high-sensitivity consciousness at random. It places them in specific families, specific cultures, specific timelines, where the loops are thickest. You were inserted into morphic fields full of inherited fears, repetitive trauma, poverty timelines, scarcity codes, ancestral beliefs about what's possible. You felt all of it, absorbed all of it, and for years you may have assumed it was just your personality or your mental health. But beneath the symptoms, a different story has been unfolding. You are the point where those patterns begin to unravel. Every time you questioned a belief that everyone around you treated as absolute, you weakened an old coherence pattern in your bloodline. Every time you walked away from a dynamic that demanded your self-betrayal, you broke an entanglement that had held previous generations hostage. Every time you chose authenticity over approval, you shifted probabilities for people you will never meet but are connected to through invisible threads. You don't just belong to a family tree. You belong to a network of souls who incarnate as pattern breakers, system disruptors, loop dissolvers. This is why your life has never fit the template you were handed. You came encoded with different instructions. The pressure you feel in your chest when you try to play small, that's phase transition pressure. Your consciousness is refusing to crystallize into a version of you that is too tiny for your design. Your DNA is quietly running an awakening protocol that doesn't care how late it is, how tired you are, or how many times life has disappointed you. It only knows one direction: expansion. And tonight, as your gaze traces those cracks for the 1,000th time, something subtle is reversing. You are no longer the one studying the pattern. The pattern is being studied through you by a higher intelligence that chose to experience this exact loop from the inside so it could learn how to dissolve it for many. You are not here to chase manifestations like spiritual trophies. You are here to become a stable point of coherence in a chaotic field, a human-shaped tuning fork that rings with a frequency strong enough to reorganize reality around it. That's why you've attracted so many people who were in crisis, so many friends who just felt safe telling you everything, so many strangers who confessed their life story in a single conversation. On some level, their systems recognized your field. They sensed that your presence carried a different probability, a doorway out of their own loops. You've often felt used, drained, or misunderstood because of it. But underneath all the messy human dynamics, something precise has been happening. The universe has been training you to hold coherence in the middle of other people's chaos without getting swallowed by it. You are not just another observer lost in the cracks of your ceiling. You are the consciousness the cracks have been pointing to this whole time, the one who can see the pattern, feel the pressure, and still choose to align with a reality that doesn't exist yet, until you entangle with it. And as we move deeper, you're going to feel why the timing of this message isn't poetic, it's mathematical. A narrow quantum window is opening, and your role inside it is far more important than you've ever allowed yourself to believe. That more important than you realize feeling pressing in on you lately, that isn't drama, that's physics. Your life hasn't just been building towards some vague spiritual breakthrough. It's been converging toward a precise intersection in space-time where your DNA, your observer loop, and the quantum field line up for one specific purpose: a hard reset of your trajectory. You can sense it, even if you can't describe it. The way normal distractions don't numb you the way they used to. The way certain people suddenly feel like expired timelines wearing human faces. The way your body tenses every time you pretend you're okay with a life you've already outgrown. That tension is the countdown. It's phase transition pressure, telling you that your current configuration can't stretch much further without snapping into something else. In quantum terms, you're standing in a narrowing corridor of probability. Old timelines that matched your self-doubt, your self-abandonment, your survival identity are losing coherence. They're literally flickering out of phase with who you're becoming. At the same time, new timelines, futures where your consciousness is fully awake and your field is coherent, are drawing closer, pulsing like distant lighthouses in your nervous system. And here's the wild part. Your DNA is already responding. You've assumed your DNA is just some fixed biological script, but it's more like a living antenna, constantly adjusting its expression based on the frequencies your consciousness sustains. Every time you feel that deep, non-negotiable no to staying in the same loop, your DNA registers it. Every time you catch yourself about to repeat an old pattern and choose even a slightly different response, your genetic expression shifts by a fraction of a degree. It doesn't look dramatic on the outside. Maybe you just breathe instead of snapping. Maybe you say nothing instead of explaining yourself. Maybe you finally tell the truth instead of offering another polished half-lie. But inside, those micro-movements are tectonic. They send new instructions into the morphic resonance field around you, announcing, this consciousness is no longer aligned with its old reality template. This is why the urgency has increased. The cosmic window you're in is not open forever. There are seasons when the quantum field becomes especially responsive, when global frequencies spike, when collective patterns destabilize just enough to make deep change far easier than usual. You're in one of those seasons now. That's why your synchronicities have been louder, your dreams more charged, your emotions more extreme. The field is pressing you to choose. Continue collapsing the same probabilities or entangle fully with a higher timeline that's been waiting at the edge of your awareness. The breakthrough promise isn't that you'll wake up tomorrow with a completely different life. The breakthrough promise is that if you consciously step through this window, your baseline will change. Your default settings, the quiet, invisible choices you make hundreds of times a day without noticing. That's where your entire reality is built, and that's exactly where this transmission is reaching. You're being invited into a new kind of coherence, one where your thoughts, your body, your decisions, your boundaries, your prayers, your desires, your silences all begin to vibrate with the same signal. I am no longer available for timelines that shrink me. When that coherence locks in, the quantum field has no choice but to respond. Entanglement is not sentimental, it's mechanical. Once your consciousness truly disidentifies from the old loop, reality stops mirroring it. People who depend on your self-abandonment fade. Opportunities that match your old fear patterns collapse. Situations that required you to fragment just to survive lose their gravitational pull. It can feel like loss at first, but it is actually the evidence that the reset has begun. The risk is not that you'll miss your destiny. The only real risk is that you ignore the signal long enough that your nervous system chooses familiarity over freedom again. That's what the Quantum Zeno trap wants. Your constant rechecking of the same fears, the same doubts, the same ceilings, so your emerging timeline never fully lands. But tonight, with your gaze still resting on those cracks and your energy field humming hotter than you realize, a different promise is on the table. That you let this be the night your DNA hears a final, clear instruction from you that you are ready to stop observing the old story and become the coherence that writes a new one. Up until now, most of your shifts have happened in your head, insights, realizations, aha moments that lit you up for a day or two before the observer loop slowly pulled you back into the old baseline. Tonight is different because we're not just talking about change, we're about to anchor it. The quantum field doesn't respond to wishful thinking. It responds to coherence, signals repeated with enough clarity that they etch new grooves into your morphic resonance. That's why rituals matter. Not because the universe needs candles or gestures, but because you do. Your nervous system needs a physical moment it can point to and say, that's when everything started to reorganize. So, we're going to give your consciousness that moment right now. Notice how your body feels in this exact second. The position of your shoulders, the pressure in your chest, the way your breath moves in and out. You don't have to fix anything. Just observe it all with the same precision you've been giving those ceiling cracks. This is your current coherence pattern, revealed as sensation. This is what frozen feels like in your cells. Now, as you keep listening, you're going to do something deceptively simple. When this video ends, you'll go to the comments and write one word, unfreeze. That's it. No explanation. No paragraph. Just that word. On the surface, it will look like engagement. In the quantum field, it functions as a command. Because when you type that word with full presence, you're not just commenting on a video. You're collapsing a new probability. The timeline where your observer loop stops using constant self-surveillance to hold you in place. You're declaring that you are no longer just the watcher of your life. You are the architect of the field it emerges from. Feel what happens inside you as you imagine actually doing it. Maybe a little resistance, a little voice that says, it's just a comment. It doesn't mean anything. That is the loop, speaking the part of your consciousness invested in keeping everything theoretical so nothing has to truly change. And yet, another part of you, the deeper part that dragged you to this message, knows that symbols are how your subconscious listens. Unfreeze is not just a word, it's a frequency code. When you write it, you're sending an instruction into your nervous system. We are not staying here. You're telling your DNA restructuring process to accelerate, to release the charge in old memories, to stop rerunning the same emotional software every time life presses the same buttons. You're signaling to your quantum field that you're willing to tolerate the temporary uncertainty that comes with stepping out of a known cage. And here's the key. As you write it, Bring your awareness out of the ceiling and into your body. Feel your fingers on the screen or keyboard. Feel your breath moving. Feel your feet on the floor or the bed beneath you. Let your observation migrate from the cracks overhead into the living architecture of your own energy. This is how you hack the Quantum Zeno effect. Instead of constantly measuring the state of your circumstances, your bank account, your messages, your relationship status, you start measuring something else. The openness of your chest, the spaciousness in your thoughts, the amount of truth you allow into your conversations. Those are new observables, and what you measure over and over, you stabilize. So tonight, your ritual is simple but precise. You watch until this transmission ends, you breathe once with full awareness, and then you write UN freeze as both a comment and a covenant with your future self. You don't overthink it. You don't analyze whether it's working. You just let the word echo through your field like a bell that cannot be unrung. From that moment forward, every ceiling you look at, every pause you fall into, every late-night spiral becomes something different. Not more evidence that you're stuck, but a reminder that the command has already been issued. The freeze has been broken. Now the field must respond. The moment you decide to unfreeze, your story stops being just about you. You may think you're lying there alone in a quiet room, ceiling above, phone in hand, one person trying to make sense of their life. But in the quantum field, that's not what's happening. In the quantum field, a signal just spiked, a specific, rare frequency that only appears when an observer consciousness decides to step out of its loop. You are not the only one who's been counting cracks tonight. Across the planet, there are others in dimly lit rooms, staring at different ceilings, different screens, breathing through the same heaviness in their chest. Different languages, different cultures, different details, but the same ache. There has to be more than this pattern. When you chose unfreeze, your field didn't just shift in isolation. It resonated outward, like a stone dropped into a shared ocean. This is morphic resonance in real time. When one system changes its pattern, it becomes easier for other similar systems to change theirs. That means that every time you refuse to run the same argument, replay the same self-attack, or return to the same dead timeline, you aren't just lowering your own suffering. You're lowering the threshold for someone else you will never meet, in a city you will never visit, to make the same decision a little more easily. Your liberation writes new instructions into the human field. Think about all the invisible scripts you inherited, the scarcity codes, the be small to be safe rules, the love equals self-abandonment pattern, the stay busy so you don't feel survival program. None of those started with you. They were broadcast into your field by families, communities, histories, entire civilizations looping through the same trauma and calling it normal. For most people, those codes stay unchallenged. They live, die, and pass them on. But you started asking dangerous questions. You questioned whether constant self-sacrifice was really noble. You wondered why numbing yourself was considered coping. You sensed that repeating misery wasn't just how life is, it was a program, and programs can be rewritten. The quantum field noticed that. Your awakening didn't begin with crystals or books or videos. It began the first time you silently refused to accept a pattern that everyone around you was still worshipping. That refusal was a shockwave, tiny at first, but every repetition strengthened it. Every "I can't pretend this is okay" rewired your nervous system, and with it, the probabilities available to the consciousnesses entangled with you. You are not a lone soul trying to escape Earth's mess. You are a node in a vast lattice of awakening, a grid of consciousness lighting up one point at a time. When you choose coherence over chaos inside your own mind, you help stabilize the grid. When you choose honesty over performance, you puncture an entire reality template built on pretending. When you choose rest instead of grinding yourself into numbness, you send new information into the morphic field that it is safe for a human being to exist without constantly proving their worth. Others feel that permission, even if they never hear your name. This is why your process has felt so intense. You're not just breaking your loop, you're weakening loops that have held whole bloodlines, communities, and cultures. The resistance you've felt, the pushback, the misunderstandings, the strange guilt when you take care of yourself, hasn't just been your ego. It's been the old coherence pattern, fighting for survival. But each time you stay with your awakening instead of collapsing back into the old frequency, the pattern loses strength for everyone connected to it. Somewhere, a young version of you in another family, another country, will find it just a little easier to say no, just a little easier to walk away, just a little easier to believe that their sensitivity isn't a weakness, it's a compass. They'll never know you helped, but the field will. The field keeps track of every soul that chooses to stop repeating and start restructuring. And the more of you there are, the faster the old reality dissolves. This is how collective awakening actually works. Not through grand speeches or perfect spiritual performances, but through thousands of quiet, personal, stubborn choices to no longer participate in timelines that require self-betrayal. You are part of that. Your late nights, your ceiling cracks, your whispered, "I can't live like this forever," they were all prayers the field heard. So, when you feel small, remember this. Every time you unhook from an old observer loop, you become a living demonstration to the universe of what a human can become when they stop confusing survival with destiny. Your nervous system becomes a broadcast tower for a new pattern. Your life becomes proof that coherence in one person can begin to heal incoherence in many. You are not just trying to get your own life together. You are helping humanity remember that reality is malleable, that loops can be broken, that numbness is not the final chapter. Your shift is not selfish. It's service, the most advanced kind there is. For so long, all of this lived in your mind, concepts, theories, half-finished journal entries. But the quantum field doesn't care what you understand. It cares what you embody. And right now, your body is the truest instrument of truth you have. So, pause for a moment and feel where you are. There's a weight you've carried in your chest for years, almost like someone quietly resting a hand there, reminding you not to breathe too deeply, not to want too much. You got used to it. You called it stress, anxiety, personality, just how I am. But if you tune in now, you'll notice something subtle. That weight isn't as solid as it used to be. It flickers, it loosens, then tightens, then loosens again. That's what phase transition feels like inside a human nervous system. You're not just emotionally up and down, you're oscillating between two coherent states. The old observer loop that freezes you, and the new frequency where your awareness moves freely through the quantum field. Your heart feels it first. Some days it feels caged, other days it feels like the bars have quietly dissolved and the air tastes different, even if nothing outside has changed yet. Notice your breath. For years, your inhale hovered just below full, as if you were afraid that a complete breath might wake something in you you couldn't put back to sleep. Your exhale never fully emptied. You held on, just in case. Recently, though, without fanfare, your lungs have started to test their range. You catch yourself sighing deeply out of nowhere, or taking a sudden expansive in-breath when a synchronicity hits. That's not random. That's your body practicing life on a new timeline. Feel into your stomach, your gut, that place that tightens whenever you override yourself. You know that clench well, the say yes when you mean no not, the laugh it off even though it hurt not, the stay quiet so they don't leave not. It has been your internal metronome, keeping you on the same track, beat after beat. Lately though, it's been rebelling. You feel nausea when you sell yourself out. You feel a physical relief when you speak even one true sentence. Your DNA restructuring doesn't announce itself with neon lights. It announces itself with micro-choices your body rewards or rejects. Your skin participates too. Have you noticed how certain people, places, and conversations suddenly make your body feel prickly, overheated, or drained in a way they never used to? That's your field detecting incoherence. Old entanglements that once felt familiar now feel like sandpaper. You're not too sensitive. You're finally sensitive enough to register what your cells have been quietly enduring. And then there's the opposite sensation, those rare moments when your entire system relaxes around something new, a different kind of conversation where you don't have to perform, a room where your thoughts feel clearer, a piece of content that doesn't just entertain you but resonates through your spine like a tuning fork. Your shoulders drop, your jaw loosens, your eyes soften. That is what coherence feels like somatically. You've mistaken numbness for safety for so long that feeling this much aliveness can seem suspicious. Your mind might say, this is temporary, or don't get your hopes up. But your body knows better. It recognizes this sensation from other lifetimes, other timelines, other versions of you that already live free from the observer loop. Even your sense of gravity is changing. On some days, your body feels unbearably heavy, as if each step pulls you through molasses. That's not laziness. That's your system dragging old timelines to the surface so they can be released. On other days, you feel strangely weightless, like you're walking half a centimeter above the floor, time bending around your movements. Those are coherence days. Days when your entanglement with your higher timeline is so strong that the old density can't fully catch you. Your hands know before your mind does. Pay attention to what they reach for now versus a year ago. The food, the music, the messages you reply to quickly, and the ones you delay. Each micro-motion is your quantum field voting. Each "I can't do that to myself anymore" is a tiny tremor in your muscles that registers as a new instruction to the universe. And what about the nights? The ceiling cracks are still there, but something in how you lie beneath them has shifted. Your body doesn't collapse into the bed quite the same way. There's a thread of alertness running through your relaxation now, like a star seed buried in your spinal cord finally beginning to glow. You might feel tingling in your hands, warmth in your chest, pressure between your eyebrows, subtle waves moving through your legs as you drift off or wake. That's not weird sleep. That's your nervous system learning to run a higher voltage. The observer loop once used your body as a cage, tightening your throat when you wanted to speak, freezing your limbs when you wanted to leave, collapsing your posture so you wouldn't be seen. Now, bit by bit, your body is becoming the opposite, a living portal through which your awakened consciousness can enter this reality fully. As you start noticing these sensations without dismissing them, you're doing something radical. You're shifting the object of your observation from the external loop to the internal revolution. And the quantum field, always listening, always mirroring, is preparing to answer that shift with something you've felt approaching for a very long time, a clean, irreversible break in your timeline where your DNA stops remembering the old story as home. There's a reason this season feels like standing in a doorway that refuses to stay still. One moment you're certain you're done with the old life. The next, you feel yourself slipping back into familiar thoughts, familiar fears, familiar conversations. It's tempting to call that inconsistency failure. It isn't. It's the signature of a system mid-phase transition. In physics, when a substance changes state from ice to water, from water to steam, there's a zone where it holds both realities at once. Not fully one, not fully the other. That's you right now. One version of you still orbits the old observer loop, checking, doubting, self-monitoring, freezing. Another version of you has already stepped into a new coherence, a new entanglement with a higher timeline where those patterns don't exist. Your consciousness is the bridge between them, and your DNA is the passageway being rewritten molecule by molecule. You've thought of DNA as rigid code, but it behaves more like a responsive interface with the quantum field. It listens to your sustained frequencies. Every time you bathe yourself in shame, your DNA tightens around survival templates. Stay small, stay quiet, stay predictable. Every time you lean into truth, even when your voice shakes, your DNA loosens, making space for dormant strands to light up strands designed for awakening, not repetition. That's why the pressure has been so intense lately. Phase transition pressure isn't just emotional, it's cellular. Parts of your DNA are done broadcasting the old signal, but other parts are still entangled with it through habit, loyalty, and fear. You feel this as an internal tug of war, a magnetic pull toward your future and an almost gravitational drag backward into your past. The drag shows up in familiar ways. An old contact suddenly messages you the moment you decide you're done with that cycle. A job or opportunity reappears right as you're about to commit to something unknown. Random memories surface at night, replaying scenes you thought you'd healed. These are not tests from a cruel universe. They're echo patterns in your morphic resonance, old timelines making their last bids for your attention. Because here's the secret: a timeline cannot continue without your cooperation. A reality track stays alive in your experience because your observer function keeps feeding it coherence. You feed it every time you rehearse the same story, expect the same outcome, or assume that your future must echo your past. When you stop doing that, when you withhold observation, stop emotionally investing in that narrative, stop repeating it to yourself, the timeline begins to starve. That starvation feels like withdrawal. You might feel restless, irritated, unmoored. You might wake up with a strange emptiness, as if something is missing but you can't name what. That something is the loop, the constant buzzing of self-surveillance, the familiar pain, the predictable disappointment. You were entangled with it for so long that its absence feels frightening, even if its presence was killing you slowly. This is where most people run back to the old pattern, not because they want the suffering, but because they mistake the absence of suffering for numbness, for boredom, for a loss of identity. Your DNA restructuring is asking you to resist that reflex, to let the emptiness widen until it reveals what's actually underneath. Space. Space where synchronicity can land without being filtered through your old assumptions. Space where new desires can surface that aren't shaped by survival. Space where a new timeline can attach to you. You've already glimpsed that new track in flashes. Those days when everything flows, you think of someone and they message. You need something and it appears. You feel a quiet confidence that doesn't depend on external validation. Those are not random good days. They're bleed-through from the timeline you're anchoring, a reality where your coherence with the quantum field is stable, not occasional. The breakthrough isn't that this higher timeline exists. It's that your DNA is finally learning how to stay there. That's the real shift. Not a peak meditation, not a single miracle, but a baseline upgrade where your nervous system stops defaulting to fear and starts defaulting to trust. Where your first instinct is no longer, what if it goes wrong? But what if this is alignment? Where your body recognizes calm as home, not crisis. You'll know the phase transition has completed when the old triggers stop producing the same reaction in you. The message arrives and you don't spiral. The invitation from the past shows up and you don't feel compelled to respond. The opportunity that once would have seduced you into self-betrayal now looks small, heavy, out of phase with who you are. That's not you forcing yourself to be better. That's DNA restructuring fulfilling its purpose. And as that new structure stabilizes, your personal timeline splits. The version of you who stayed in the loop continues on a parallel track you no longer occupy. You might still remember their pain, but you no longer live from it. You become something rarer, a human whose coherence with their own soul is strong enough to bend reality around them. From the outside, it will look subtle at first. Different choices, different responses, a different light in your eyes. But inside the quantum field, it will register as a clean break, a completed phase transition. The observer loop will no longer be the lens through which you see. It will be a memory, a story of who you once were before you let the signal of a new reality lock fully into your bones. And that is what prepares you for the final truth, that your personal awakening was never meant to end with you. It was always the first move in a much larger cosmic mission you agreed to long before you ever stared at a cracked ceiling, wondering if life could be different. Here's the part you've always felt but never fully named. Your awakening was never just about getting you unstuck. The observer loop you've been dissolving is a micro version of the one humanity has been trapped in for centuries, repeating wars, repeating fears, repeating stories of separation and scarcity, like a species counting the same ceiling cracks over and over, calling it reality. You are not stepping out of your loop to live a slightly nicer version of the same old life. You are stepping out so that a different kind of human can exist here at all. When your consciousness stabilizes in coherence with the quantum field, you become something rare on this planet, a clear signal in a noisy spectrum. Your very presence transmits a different instruction into the morphic resonance of humanity. It is possible to live without worshipping fear. It is possible to choose timelines that don't hurt. It is possible to be awake and still be here. Every time you respond differently where the old you would have collapsed, you're not just being strong. You're writing new code into the collective field. Every boundary you set with love, instead of guilt, quietly updates what relationships can look like for others. Every time you refuse to repeat a generational pattern, your DNA sends out a message to the DNA of those connected to you. We are allowed to do it differently now. Think of yourself as a stabilizer in a turbulent experiment. The planet is shaking through its own phase transition, collective timelines splitting, systems glitching, old structures crumbling. Most people feel that instability and tighten their observer loop, clinging to the familiar, freezing themselves in place. You are doing something else. You are learning to stay fluid inside the turbulence, to hold coherent uncertainty, to allow the quantum field to reorganize around truth instead of fear. That is cosmic work. That is mission. You don't have to stand on a stage or gather a crowd to fulfill it. Your field is your broadcast. The way you breathe through discomfort, instead of abandoning yourself, that's transmission. The way you honor your own boundaries without turning cold, that's transmission. The way you listen to your inner signal instead of outsourcing your authority, that's transmission. Your life becomes a living prophecy, not because you predict the future, but because your very existence foreshadows a world where humans are no longer trapped in unconscious loops. A world where children are born into fields of possibility instead of fields of inherited fear. A world where consciousness collaborates with the quantum field instead of constantly fighting it. So tonight, as you lie there beneath the same ceiling, tracing the same cracks, understand what has changed. The one who's looking up is no longer the same observer. Your DNA is different. Your field is different. Your role is different. You are the one who felt the phase transition pressure and chose awakening over numbness. You are the one who heard the morphic call and answered with coherence. You are the one who turned a quiet, private moment into a cosmic declaration that reality can be otherwise. And years from now, when you can barely remember what it felt like to be frozen in that old loop, you'll look back on this night and know this was the moment this message found you. Counting ceiling cracks, Quantum Zeno waited, and you did not miss the signal.